All right, guys, let's talk about missions. We are in Romans chapter 15. Right there, we'll be in verse 19 through 21, a real short little section. He says, by the power of signs and wonders, by the power of the Holy Spirit of God, so that from Jerusalem and all the way around to Illyricum, I have fulfilled the ministry of the gospel of Christ. And thus I make it my ambition to preach the gospel, not where Christ has already been named, lest I build on someone else's foundation. But as it is written, those who have never been told of him will see, and those who have never heard will understand. So that's it. This is Paul's heart. We looked yesterday at his heart for kind of teaching the church in Rome, even though he is not really an authority in Rome. He still felt called by God to teach, and he was able to minister to them in that way. And now he's getting ready to talk about his upcoming plans to visit Rome, which we'll get into tomorrow. But he says, I have been all over the place, from Jerusalem all the way to Illyricum, preaching the gospel. His goal, he says, is to preach the gospel where nobody's heard of Jesus yet. That's the thing that motivates him. Don't think of Paul as a pastor who settles down in some place and builds a church and builds a discipleship program and all that. Don't think of him that way. He would probably be very good at that, but that is not his thing. He was briefly working with Barnabas, you might remember from the book of Acts, in the city of Antioch, as you could say, elders or pastors over the church of Antioch. But he was sent out with Barnabas on these missionary trips. And after that, he periodically revisits Antioch, goes to Jerusalem. But by and large, he is just a traveling missionary from one place to another. Read your book of Acts and the whole second half of it, and you'll see all these missionary journeys that he takes here and there. And that is, now we know why. Romans 15 tells us why. He has an ambition to preach the gospel all over the place. I make it my ambition to preach the gospel not where he's already been named, not where Christ has already been named, lest I build on someone else's foundation, but as it's written. Okay, so now he's writing to Rome and build on someone else's foundation. Rome is a church that's already in existence. To the church of God in Rome is how the epistle starts out. He didn't plant it. Okay, so he is hoping to visit Rome, but he's really excited about going past Rome. All right, we'll get into it tomorrow. It's just a longer section tomorrow, but he's planning to get all the way to Spain. He's getting to the far western reaches of the Roman Empire, as far off the map as he knows how to his knowledge. He doesn't know anything beyond that. Okay, so he says, from Jerusalem, round about as far as Illyricum. Illyricum is the eastern side of the Adriatic Sea. If you think of Italy coming down as a peninsula, the Adriatic Sea is east of Italy. It is Italy's eastern border. And then across that Adriatic Sea, you get to modern-day Albania, Montenegro, Bosnia, Croatia. They call them the Balkans. And then in the south, at the southern tip is Greece, and you're probably more familiar with Greece. Anyway, that used to be called Illyricum in the time of the New Testament. So that's the region. Now, in the book of Acts, I don't see, it doesn't really describe a lot happening in Illyricum in detail. He's in Greece, of course. He's in Corinth. He's in Athens. And there, and he says, from Jerusalem as far as Illyricum. It doesn't mean he traveled all the way through Illyricum. But he's saying, look, that's a large area to reach, to preach the gospel. Okay, he started imagine Jerusalem. That's probably the most well-known of the cities in the book of Acts. North of Jerusalem is Antioch, which was actually kind of Paul's home base. North of that, if you keep traveling, you got modern-day Syria and stuff right in there. But keep going north, you get modern-day Turkey, which was called Asia back then, or Asia Minor. And that's where Ephesus is, Colossae. They are in Turkey, okay? Ephesus probably being the most famous in terms of the New Testament of the churches. Okay, that's Turkey. Now you keep going north, you get into a region called Galatia, and then you start moving west and you get into Macedonia. That's where Philippi, Berea, Thessalonica are. You keep moving west and actually bend south, and you get into Greece. You get Corinth and Athens, then he would travel. Went from there and then traveled back east again towards Ephesus, Turkey, and then back eventually to Jerusalem. Okay, he wrote the book of Romans from a place called Centria, which is not far from Corinth in Greece. Okay, so that's a really basic run through of where he's been, and he is planning to go farther. So, question for you: when you read that, does that excite you? That idea of preaching the gospel to places, to people who have never heard it before. All right, that's what he's talking about. Now he's writing to a church in Rome that is a church that's not necessarily a missionary church in terms of like they live in Rome and they stay in Rome. Paul doesn't have that. Paul, he goes here, he goes there, he moves from one place to another constantly. And so ever since then, ever since New Testament times, not that Paul was the first missionary, just he and Barnabas were the first ones really to be recorded in detail, but the church, the Christian church, has multiple duties. We have the duty to go into all the nations making disciples, right? The Great Commission. Go into all the nations. Paul's doing that. Go to all the nations. Go to the ones you've never been to before. That's what that means. Fill the earth with the glory of God. The whole earth needs to know about him. So if someone's already preaching in some town, find one they're not preaching in and move to that one, right? And go there. That's Paul's ambition. It's to constantly be on the move. I'll plant a church and get the gospel there, and then I'm going to move on. That's his thing. That's what he does. That's what he cares about. He's writing to Rome. He's never been there. He's planning to go there. But he's not planning to stay there. He's planning to move on beyond that to Spain. We'll look at it tomorrow. On the other hand, what is that Great Commission? Go into all the nations, doing what? Making disciples and baptizing them and teaching them to obey all that I've commanded you, Jesus says, Matthew 28, 19, 20. So go into all the nations. That requires these missionaries that just go. They move. Some of them are going to move to a place and just plant a church there. Others are going to move and move and move and keep on moving. All right? Not everybody, I don't believe, is meant to do that. Some people are meant for it. Paul obviously was. I've planted a church here in York Springs. I don't have a personal ambition to travel the world constantly reaching new people with the gospel who never heard it. I kind of do. I'll admit it. I'll happily claim that there is a part of my heart that beats for that stuff, but I don't believe that's my calling, at least not right now in my life. It is to be here. So go into the nations, but what do you do there? You make disciples and you teach them everything. Paul, it seems to me, he has a lot to teach, and so he'll write letters back and forth. Like we got 2 of them to Corinth, pretty long. We've got Romans, we've got Galatians, we got them. Okay, so he's happy to teach. When he's in these cities, and you read your book of Acts, he's in the synagogue or he's in some location by the river in Philippi. He's up on Mars Hill in Athens. He'll go wherever. He'll go to the town center in Ephesus. Wherever he can be, he will go there and teach. When they let him, he goes back day to day or week over week, Sabbath over Sabbath, teaching everything he can teach. But listen, Paul studied his Bible and knew God really well. He could have settled down in one city for his whole life and not even taught everything he knew. Okay? So he is going city to city, usually for short periods of time. I think the longest maybe in Corinth was like 2 years or so. I maybe 3. I forget. We studied Acts last summer, and I remember teaching it then, but I don't remember now. Point is, he made the decision, I'm not going to settle down and preach just to this church and teach them everything Jesus has commanded and raise up nothing but disciples through this church. He made the decision not to do that. He made a decision to travel, launch churches, leave some missionary buddies behind. He periodically will leave Titus behind or Timothy or something for a period of time to minister. and he'll write letters back, but he's going to keep moving because he wants the gospel, the basic message of the gospel. Repent and believe the gospel. He wants that to go really far, really fast. He regarded the Great Commission, go into all the nations, as something he was expected to get done in his own lifetime, in his own ministry. Not Paul alone, but he and the other apostles and these other missionaries that are constantly going out. You bump into Apollos, and Priscilla and Aquila seem to turn up in every town, it seems like. And of course, the other disciples, Peter is mentioned a lot in the book of Acts going around. They thought, hey, go into all the nations. They thought that was something they were supposed to do right then. They didn't see 2,000 years later, we still haven't gotten it done. They saw, hey, we can do this in our lifetimes. Rome has built up roads all across the known world, so we can travel. This thing can go. So I'm going to go run around, Paul thought. I'm going to preach the gospel everywhere I can. We're going to launch churches in those places. Those churches can raise up the disciples. They can continue to teach all that Jesus commanded. But I'm off to the races. I'm going to go plant the next church. I'm going to go here. I'm going to move along. I'm going to get to Illyricum. I'm going to get to Rome. I'm going to get to Spain. I'm going to keep going, keep advancing the gospel, right? That was his ambition. So whether you are somebody who is called to that, I believe there are more people called to that than do that. I believe there are more of you who are called to international missions, to mosquitoes and tropical diseases, and you can't drink the water kind of countries. I believe that there are a lot more out there than are currently stepping out and doing it. I believe the war-torn places, refugee camps, these kinds of places need Jesus, and in many cases aren't getting Jesus, not at least as much as if everyone called to this would do it. I think there'd be more people doing it. On the other hand, what about the make disciples? What about the local churches? Somebody's got to keep on developing the new believers just in this area. How are we going to do that? So we're called to things, but if you are a Christian, you are called either to just continue a traveling evangelist kind of lifestyle, or a discipleship, hunker down, build up, raise up disciples kind of lifestyle. And they're really not in opposition to one another. They're I think, two very helpful categories for thinking of this kind of ministry, but ultimately we're all called to the whole thing. All right. Paul's ambition is to do that. He does not care that he's going to get himself killed and get himself beaten up, put in jail, and everything else. It does not bother him. He just does it anyway. And if he can raise up some more disciples and send them out, he's happy to do that, and they'll come along with him and everything else. So I share that just as a challenge for you. Look, they took the Great Commission literally. They really took it as something they were expected to do, and it was their ambition, Paul and these other disciples as well. So does your heart beat for that? Do you love reaching people who don't know Jesus with the gospel? Do you know how to raise up a disciple? Our church is going to get a lot better at this over the course of this year by the grace of God. We got to get understanding of what discipleship means and how to do it. That's going to be a thing that we are looking at here over the next couple of weeks. We're going to be standing up, is the theme for the year. Stand up and do the thing God tells you to do, which is the Great Commission. Make disciples. All right. God bless you. That's enough of that. We'll talk about Spain and Rome and Paul's plans in greater detail tomorrow. God bless. See you then.